In the heart of history, there existed a place that defied all norms, Kowloon Walled City, or as locals called it, the City of Darkness. This wasn't your average neighborhood. It was a maze of old buildings, dark streets, and a world controlled by crimes like gambling, prostitution, and drugs. Originally a military base in China, it came under British rule during colonial times, but when Hong Kong became part of China again, this lawless place was left to itself. With no one to control it, Kowloon Walled City became a lawless refuge. Both the Chinese and British governments stayed away, afraid of its danger. As a result, it grew, housing an astonishing 35,000 people in a small area of just 6.5 acres by the 1980s. But it wasn't a normal community. It was a place where people who didn't fit in elsewhere found shelter. Outsiders, criminals, and those who needed a break from the outside world. In this lawless place, people had to safeguard themselves, setting up makeshift schools and elder care centers amidst the chaos. Above, bare electrical wires tangled with dripping pipes and heaps of trash below. The city, always dark and damp, was packed with towering buildings, over 10,000 families and 8,500 businesses squeezed into tight spaces. Sunlight hardly made it through, giving criminals cover to operate unseen. Navigating this maze-like city was risky without a local guide. Locals moved across rooftops using makeshift walkways and rusty ladders for quick travel, reinforcing the city's reputation as an underground cell. Interestingly though, in this bustling economy of Kowloon Walled City, many businesses thrived, producing everything from tasty fish balls and noodles to various plastic goods shipped out from the city. Among the diverse food vendors, some offered exotic meats like snake and other wild animals, but in the city's rougher areas, you would find X-rated cinemas, gambling spots, brothels, and places where drugs were freely available. Heroin addiction was widespread, with dealers openly selling the drug at low prices to anyone willing to buy it. Eventually, the lawless reign of Kowloon Walled City came to an end in 1994. The Hong Kong government took decisive action, systematically throwing out residents and demolishing what remained of the buildings and homes. In different parts of the world, there are secret jails where prisoners are kept and given no legal rights. Some of these facilities are believed to be managed by the CIA, such as Cobalt or Salt Pit, located near Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan. The existence of these secretive sites raises serious concerns about human rights and fairness in justice. In 2005, troubling information came to light about one of these sites. It became known that many individuals labeled as enemies of the state had suffered mistreatment there. Insiders described it as a grim dungeon where prisoners from Al-Qaeda experienced horrific things. They were often chained, with their hands kept above their heads, confined in small, dark spaces. They were subjected to practices like forced feeding, as documented in an official report by the CIA. In addition to physical pain, prisoners were subjected to psychological suffering. They were often blindfolded, provided with spoiled meals, and exposed to constant cold temperatures. Psychological tactics aiming to break their spirits included non-stop loud music and sensory deprivation, leaving them isolated from the world around them. These methods caused immense mental distress to the prisoners, adding to their physical torment and making their lives even more unbearable. One prisoner, Al-Nar, a former bodyguard to Osama bin Laden, was discovered after enduring 13 days without sleep, shackled in a standing position. Shockingly, CIA records failed to document when his ordeal began. These methods aimed to degrade and weaken prisoners until they broke, making them more likely to reveal sensitive information. In official reports, communications between officials and interrogators discussed other harsh tactics, including waterboarding. The CIA reserved these extreme physical and psychological interrogation techniques for the most severe cases. However, the brutality of these methods and the lack of empathy at the Salt Pit remained hidden from the public eye for many years. In the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, the British were major players in the East, especially through the East India Company, which controlled much of the trade in the area. They began building Fort William in Calcutta to protect their wealth and goods, but this angered the Nawab of Bengal. On June 16, 1756, he responded by sending an army of 50,000 soldiers, along with 50 cannons and 500 elephants to stop the construction. The British mounted a brave defense, but with only 170 soldiers, they were eventually overrun. One of the leaders from Bengal promised that no harm would come to the British. However, that night, 146 British prisoners, including women and injured people, were stripped naked and crammed into a tiny cell in Fort William. This cell was originally meant for minor criminals and was very small, just 18 by 14 feet with only 2 small windows. This meant the prisoners suffered immensely in the hot Indian summer. That dreadful night, forever remembered as the Black Hole of Calcutta, was a night of pure torment. The prisoners faced unbearable heat as they gasped for air, desperately pushing each other towards the window in search of a small breath of relief. Amidst the escalating panic, the cruel captors found amusement in their suffering, taunting and teasing as they watched them fight for the scarce air supply. When dawn finally broke and the captors opened the door, only 23 souls remained among the living, while the rest lay dead, scattered throughout the cell, a dreadful reminder of the night's horrors. The British officer who led Fort William and survived recalled the terrifying night, calling it a night of horrors beyond words. In response, the British swiftly regained control of the fort the following year with 3,000 soldiers, governing Calcutta for a long time afterward. Meanwhile, the Nawab who caused the suffering ran away and was later murdered by his people, with his body dumped in a river. Constructed by Dutch settlers in 1482, the Elmina Castle stands tall along the coast of Ghana as the oldest European structure south of the Sahara Desert. Despite its majestic appearance and beautiful setting, this castle holds a dark history. Originally intended for trading valuable goods like ivory and gold, it later gained fame as the largest slave fort in the region. Elmina Castle was utilized by various European nations, including the Dutch, Danish, English, Swedish, and Portuguese. These forts were heavily fortified due to their involvement in the slave trade and economic ambitions, and were targets of rival slave traders and pirates. The cruel legacy of Elmina Castle is evident in the ancient cannons mounted on its walls and the dismal dungeons, where captured individuals were imprisoned in darkness and dampness until they were sold off. In these small, overcrowded dungeons, the captives endured dreadful conditions, facing constant cruelty and humiliation. Diseases like malaria were very common, and the absence of proper hygiene and food meant that many died within the walls of the dungeon. Elmina Castle played a pivotal role as a bustling port for ships transporting human captives, as well as rubber and cotton, destined primarily for Britain and America. These ships then returned to Africa's western shores, laden with weapons and bullets. It's estimated that approximately 30,000 enslaved people passed through Elmina every year until 1814, when the Dutch stopped the trade. After Ghana gained independence from the British Empire in 1957, Elmina Castle was repurposed as a Ghanaian police training center for some time. Today, it stands as a museum and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. A plaque positioned near the entrance of the dungeon serves as a strong reminder, bearing the inscription, "May humanity never again perpetrate such injustice against humanity. We, the living, vow to uphold this noble decree." Chernobyl's Reactor 4 is one of the harshest places humans have ever faced. Even after the Chernobyl disaster, the danger didn't end with the explosion. It still exists today. On April 26, 1986, when Reactor 4 had a catastrophic explosion, it triggered the worst nuclear disaster ever seen, earning a top score of 7 in the International Nuclear Event Scale. The initial response involved spending nearly $70 billion and mobilizing over 500,000 workers. The cleanup effort was massive, including the construction of a huge structure made of steel and concrete known as a sarcophagus to contain the radiation. This was an enormous task, unlike anything seen before. Soon after finishing the sarcophagus, Soviet officials admitted it would only last 20 to 30 years. The construction was rushed, and many workers lost their lives during the 7-month project. Despite attempts to seal off important areas, the sarcophagus had holes in the roof, letting in water and causing rust. Several months after the initial explosion, scientists discovered a highly radioactive mass called corium. This mass was formed by the meltdown in Reactor 4. It was named the elephant's foot because of its shape and wrinkled appearance. This black mass of corium has different layers and textures, looking like glass in some parts and tree bark in others. The elephant's foot, which is 3 meters long, is so toxic that even being near it for just a few minutes can be deadly. Despite this danger, some courageous photographers wearing protective gear have managed to take pictures of it. However, these images are distorted and spotted with radiation. The Chernobyl tragedy remains the worst nuclear disaster in human history, and its toxic aftermath still affects the world. The elephant's foot, a symbol of the disaster's devastation, continues to decay, but it's too dangerous to move or approach without protection. Therefore, Reactor 4 remains one of the most dangerous places on the planet. Which of these buildings terrifies you the most, to the extent that you wouldn't want to encounter them even in your dreams? Let us know in the comments section below, and if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more interesting content. Thank you for watching.